Amen. Good evening, everyone. Sorry, I jumped in a bit late. I hope everybody's ready for our panel discussion today. We're going to be talking about the tourism sector, and there's a lot that has been happening. That we need to be chatting about when it comes to SMMEs. We know what has been happening with COVID-19. We know how COVID-19 has actually, created a big catastrophe, something that we never expected, and then it really hit the SMMEs very hard. We've got a very packed panel today. There's a couple of people that are sitting on the panel, and it's people that, they are highly involved within the SMME space. We're running a bit late, so I'm just going to jump in, and kick off so that we can get into those discussions, that all of us have been expecting and what we've been waiting for. So in order to do the opening, we actually have the Deputy Minister of Department of Tourism, Your Honorable Fish Mahlalela. So I'm just going to read you his bio a little bit, just to introduce him. A person who's been, I think he's gotten the bad end of the situation that we're going through right now. So Mr. Amos Fish Mahlalela is the Deputy Minister of the Department of Tourism of the Republic of South Africa. From 29 May 2019. He's a member of the African National Congress in the National Assembly of South Africa, and is the ANC Whip at Portfolio Committee on Health, so National Assembly of Committees. In terms of his academic qualifications, he obtained his matric certificate from Nkomazi High School and got an honors degree in governance and leadership from the University of Witwatersrand. So he has served in government for over 21 years now, and is former regional transport MEC, as well as a former member of the provincial Executive Council of Mpumalanga. In 2002, Mahlalela won the African National Congress Championships of Mpumalanga. Mahlalela has been the member of the African National Congress since 1980 and holds seat for an ANC in the National Assembly of South Africa. With further ado, Honorable Deputy Minister, I'll open up the floor for you so that you can give us your thoughts and background in terms of what we're going to be chatting about in this webinar. Welcome.
Thank you very much, and greetings to you, Mr. Sokosi. Let me also take this opportunity to greet the panelists that are part of this discussion. More importantly, welcome to all the participants who are very key in this webinar that we are engaging today. And good afternoon to everybody. On the 23rd of March 2020, President Cyril Ramaphosa announced that South Africa will enforce a 21-day lockdown over coronavirus. The action we're taking, and I quote, "The action we're taking now will have a lasting impact on the economic costs," close quote. He went on to assure us that, "But we are sure that the cost of not acting now will be far greater," close quote. As we gather today on this visual platform, we're doing so because of the lasting economic cost, as the President has said. The situation we find ourselves in calls for an extraordinary response. Therefore, there can be no half measures, reiterating the words of the President of our country. We all need to understand that the road to recovery will not be easy. It will take nothing less than rebirth, which is a product of our resilience, guards, and partnership by all stakeholders. As we work towards recovery, in terms of making sure that this development of our country there is an urgent need to make sure that we finalize the recovery plan, working together with you, our social partners. We are, as a department and as government, determined that we should not merely return to where we were before the pandemic struck. We are instead looking at actions that will build a new inclusive tourism sector that benefits our people as a whole through employment creation, sustainable development and growth. The engagement today must further indicate that Northern Ireland as a tourism sector will only succeed if we struck the right chord in bringing all stakeholders together, not leaving our communities behind. Your small businesses have been ordered to shut down. Employees have been forced to work, some of them from home. Supply chains have been disrupted, and others have dried up. Many of your clients are concerned as to whether or not these small businesses will get through this pandemic, since no one knows how long this economic situation will last. As we know, we still don't have a vaccine. We must therefore put measures that will bring hope and stability to the industry. Indeed, no one knows how long this is going to happen, to last until, because we don't know when the vaccine will be found. For the SME, for the tourism SMEs, the situation has not changed since the country moved to lockdown level 2 on the 17th August 2020. To revive the sector, resources are needed. Except the resources, there is issue of infrastructure that needs to be rehabilitated in order to allow us to restart the sector. Today, like all business sectors in South Africa and in the world at large, your world has drastically changed because of the COVID-19 induced lockdown. As small, medium, and macro enterprises, you are regarded as job creators. You are regarded as the resilience of the economy. But COVID-19 has eroded all of that. You have been forced to lay down employees and to shut down your businesses because of lack of capital. There is no sector in the whole world that has envisaged this setback. Big businesses have been seriously affected, and how much more the small businesses. How do we then survive the adverse and the impact of this COVID-19? Our topic today is, what do tourism SMEs need to survive the adverse impacts of COVID-19, from headache to hope and restart? The headache, amongst others, is caused by the uncertainty as to when are things going to return to normal. As I've indicated earlier on, that as long as there's no vaccine, the situation will not be normal. It is unfortunate that we will never return to how things were in the past, but the new normal has been ushered in. So we will be forced to do things differently in order to make sure that we attract our tourists to come to South Africa, our own domestic tourists to be able to visit our places. We need to ensure them about their safety. Not just the safety as it relates to crime, but also safety as it relates to the health in relation to the COVID-19 pandemic. As you know, the COVID-19 pandemic negatively impacted the South African economy, which was already struggling to support the needs of the citizen. It is for this reason that we need to engage and talk about the impact of the pandemic to our sector and never generalized. By doing this engagement, we believe that we will come up with new ways of looking at interventions that are needed for the sector to restart. Ours is a participatory democracy where we need to involve all those who are affected and stand to benefit from the recovery of the sector. As we pave this way to the people, to you, we must, and as the lockdown has been relaxed, we must then say, how do we bring hope? How do we make sure that the industry is able to function properly and be able to bring the necessarily economy that is needed by South Africa? As a Department of Tourism, we've developed a recovery plan for the sector with 3 strategic themes. The first 2 strategic themes is for protecting and rejuvenating supply and reignite demand. Speak for the face to find ourselves as a sector. Amongst the strategic recommendation of the first strategic theme, we are saying we need to conclude a comprehensive industrial government recovery partnership to collaborate on all aspects of tourism recovery. Who else can we partner with except tourism business owners? We further recommend that in order to reignite demand, we need to catalyze demand through the phases of economic reopening with informative and inspirational messaging that encourage safe tourism and domestic vacation experiences. The new normal dictates that we talk amongst ourselves on the roles that each stakeholder needs to play in the recovery of our sector. This platform is not for us to lament, but to come up with ways in which we can resuscitate our businesses during this pandemic. It seems we have to learn to live with a pandemic, as I've indicated, because there is no indication as to whether it is going to be going away very soon. We will only have certainty once a vaccine has been discovered. So in order to make sure that we stimulate demand, we need to engage on an aggressive marketing strategy so that we're able to make sure that we mobilize our people to start visiting these tourist attraction areas and your businesses. Tourism, as we all know, has become very competitive sector. Therefore, we'll need to do a lot of work to remind travelers, both locally and internationally, that South Africa is truly an inspiring destination. And therefore, as I've indicated, safety and security therefore becomes very key in everything that we do. As I conclude, let me conclude by referring what former President Nelson Mandela once said, and I quote, "Everyone can rise above their circumstances and achieve success if they are dedicated to and passionate about what they do," close quote. I agree with him, especially when he put in this way: a good head and a good heart are always a formidable combination. Let me take this opportunity, program moderator, to declare today's conversations officially open and thank everybody for joining us. And we hope that by the time we end this, who will have been empowered, who will be able to come up with urgent interventions that will resuscitate the sector and make sure that we take the tourism sector forward. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. I really, really appreciate that, and thank you for joining us. We really appreciate you, giving us your time today, and ready to engage the rest of the panelists. I think we've got people that are full of action, full of energy, and full of ideas. A couple of faces here, people that have been in this SMME development space for quite a while. So I'm really looking forward to the ideas that you guys are going to be bringing through. And I think for the Deputy Minister as well, I think it's gonna be good for you to listen to some of these experts, coming through. So as you guys know, it's still Women's Month. It's not over yet. So I'm gonna go through everyone, just for our panelists to give their opening remarks. I will try to keep it as short as possible. And then I'm going to introduce them one by one. I'm going to start with our lovely women here, and then we're going to go through that order. So I think the first person that's going to come up, it's Dominique. So Dominique, I'm just going to read your profile briefly so that everybody can understand your profile and where you're from. I'm gonna try, guys, and compress your bios, okay? Just read them, be as short as as possible. So Dominique Vincent holds an executive manager role as acting Deputy Director General with the Department of Small Business Development, commonly known as the DSBD, and is responsible for enterprise development and entrepreneurship with 15 years experience in the public sector. Okay, so Dominique, welcome, and same to you as well. Thank you for for making time for us. We'd obviously like to hear your opening remarks as well. In terms of this pandemic, some of the points that the Deputy Minister has touched on. So yeah, the stage is yours, and thanks as well for giving us your time.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, DM panelists and guests. Thank you for the introduction. Yes, from headache to hope to restart. I think it's so imperative to outline that the department has recently embarked on a COVID-19 Business Pulse survey in partnership with the World Bank. And it has showed that SMEs have been really hit hard by many channels. We looked at demand shocks, financial shocks, as well as supply shocks. And the survey was conducted in the second half of May. That was during level 4 of the lockdown, and more than 2,200 SMMEs, including informal enterprises, were interviewed. So later on, when I go into the session, I will provide a little bit more information, but yes, it does hit hard and align directly with the theme of today's discussion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. Nice and easy and simple. And then I'm going to introduce our next panelist as well. Just going to go through their profile briefly. So Mpupi Kupe, I think Mpupi, we finally managed to get your name correctly. We've been saying it wrong for all of these years. But Mpupi Kupe has gained tremendous experience, in-depth knowledge and understanding of the various development related to government legislation. And this has made her a subject matter expert in the BEE and ESD industry, and allowed her to work on various projects that speak to transformation and the development of entrepreneurs. I know, Mpupi, you're one of those people that have crossed paths with and your organization as well in terms of the work that you do. So I'd like to hear your opening remarks.
Thank you, Sibusiso, and good afternoon to everybody. I'm quite excited about today's engagement, because I'm really hoping that we'll come out of this having shared pearls of wisdom that are very practical for the SMEs to apply, and indeed any other organization that is grappling with COVID. I think from an opening perspective, I would like to align myself with the headache to home to restart. In terms of the headache, I believe the greatest headache that we have all struggled with during COVID, the impact of that has translated in our cash flow. So I think we must park it as that. Let's isolate the headache to the impact of COVID and how it has translated in terms of the headache that it has caused from our ability to honor our monthly expenses. In terms of hope, I would like to ask that we remind ourselves that whilst COVID has extended over a period that's longer than ideal, A crisis allows us to change our minds about certain things that I think when we can get comfortable, we don't necessarily have the appetite or the time to reconsider. So let the hope come from the possibility of what exists as we look forward and not grapple with the reality that we're currently facing. The reset, to my mind, is the opportunity for us to change our minds about some of the habits and some of the practices that we had adopted previously that perhaps we should have looked at, but didn't have the time again or the capacity to do so. So again, let's not waste a good crisis. Let us see the headache for what it is, impact on cash flow. Let us see the hope for what it is. There is reality after COVID. And let us challenge ourselves to say, what is it that we want to change our minds about in terms of how we did business before, that this crisis now allows us to revisit and say, in reality, this is probably what I should have been doing differently, but because there wasn't a strong trigger, I wasn't compelled to prioritize that. But now is the time for us to say, how is it that we can come out of this and not only survive, but thrive? I look forward to the inputs from all our panelists, and I'll certainly give my 2 cents. But from what we've seen during this time, the companies that we work with, SMEs and bigger, have been given the opportunity to change their minds around practices that were embedded for too long that may have been hurting you, just not to the extent that COVID has allowed us to see. Thank you, Sibusiso.
Wow, I like that, Mpupe. And I think, you know, especially when it comes to you and Alon, when we speak about the ESD sector and, you know, everything that we've been seeing happening in the sector in a past couple of years, and how, you know, the weak programs that we've been seeing from all of these other providers might have actually, you know, caused being part of the impact. You know, SMMEs could have been protected, but I'm really interested once we get in, and then we can actually discuss that topic. And next panelist and the final of the women, before we move to the gents, is Nemala Reddy. Give a little bit of background in terms of who Nemala is and where she comes from. So Nemala Reddy is the Senior Manager for Enterprise Development at Nedbank. She joined Nedbank in 2004 and worked across various clusters within the Nedbank before focusing on enterprise development in 2007. And, you know, Nemala, I can speak for you when I say, you know, when I came to visit you in your office, your passion for SMMEs is on another level. So yeah, looking forward to hearing what your opening remarks are. Unmute, Nemala.
Apologies. Thank you very much. I think that, yes, I totally resonate with our speakers thus far. And I think, yes, despite the doom and gloom that we are faced with, we have to somehow find that silver lining. And I think we have enough expertise around the table today to at least get the conversation going to see what exactly are the steps that needs to be put in place to keep the momentum going. And certainly, I think, you know, we have to remain cognizant of an important element, and that is we were already facing weak economic growth and difficult times prior to COVID and the pandemic hitting in our business sector. So I think that is an important element to take note of. I just want to agree with my colleague Mpupi, who said that you know, let's not waste a good crisis. And I totally agree with that 100%, in that perhaps this is time now to stop and take stock and really look back. And some of the businesses that I've been engaging on a one-on-one basis has been, you know, along the process of this journey of life, we've gotten caught up. And a lot of the times when we started off with our aspiration in terms of why we're in this space and why we're running our businesses, we've had to make decisions, but sometimes we really didn't want to. It's taken us down a different path, or through whatever the influencing circumstances may have been. We're now sitting in a place where some business owners are really not quite sure, you know, what is going on and why. And the one thing that I really drive strongly is that you run your business. In many instances, it starts off from a point of necessity, but certainly you take your passion and you implement it and it becomes your business, or somewhere along the line you integrate the two. And I think for many of our businessmen and women, it's been a case of, what is this still my passion? Is this really going the way I want it to be? Because we know that when you really enjoy what you're doing, it just flows. And so I think this is definitely a point to stop and take note, to pause and reflect, and to see what needs to be changed on all levels, whether it's from the way I'm running my business, from the regulatory environment, from what the terms of engagement, what are the key factors what is the enabling environment that's needed. I think holistically all around, this is the prime moment for us to stop, take stock and say, am I doing what I want to do? And is this going the way the policies, the regulations, the different corporate, private and public sector holistically, is everyone doing what they're supposed to be doing to ensure that we're all working towards the same objectives? Thank you.
Wow. I think somebody already said, well pointed out, Nemala. This is my passion, you know. So I think, you know, while you were giving your opening remarks, somebody was already connecting, and that's what we're looking for, right? We're looking for people to be able to connect with the conversation that's happening. So now I'm going to go to the gents. The gents also, people that have been in the sector, people that have passion for SMMEs. So I'm going to start with Akash. And then I will read you his profile. I always like reading people's profiles because most of the pictures that you find there is when they were still 21, you know, and you see them, they're actually quite different. But Mr. Akash Singh is a registered chartered accountant and has completed his MBA in strategic planning. He's the chief executive officer and co-founder of Sigma International, a global enterprise development, innovation, and management consulting business with offices in the USA. Wow, Akash, I think, yeah, that's a mouthful. Yeah, I'd like to hear your opening remarks, you know, in this topic that we are currently dealing with.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Good afternoon, Sibusiso. I'm honored to be first in the queue after the ladies. So thank you very, very much. Ladies and gentlemen, belated World Entrepreneurship Day. Happy Entrepreneurship Day for all the entrepreneurs that are in here this afternoon for Friday last week. And I think, as the previous have alluded in their context, after 150 days or thereabout of lockdown, it's bloodbath in the industry. With more than 300 million tourists, less for the first 5 months of this year. I think we're expecting 100 million worth of jobs to be lost globally, what the United Nations World Tourism Organization has alluded to. So I think we're in the same boat like with many global organizations. But in today's context, I think I want to be able to set the tone to say that amongst all these hardships and over the last 150 days that we've been monitoring, we have a small sample of 138 tourism businesses that we've been working with. We're seeing an element of resilience that's starting to emerge. And this resilience is those organizations that we thought on day one and day two wouldn't last 5 or 6 months, but they're still there 150 days later. And some of it we're saying is an element of informality. The smaller businesses, flexibility attached to them, less overheads and obligations. So I want to plant the seed about how do we consider and embrace informality in the tourism sector to make it more inclusive, to grow it. And we're seeing an element of that resilience. But I don't believe that we're going to be able to do this on its own. And we can't leave this responsibility to entrepreneurs or to those that are informal. I think we need to influence and reset this ecosystem. And I think there's no better time. So ladies and gentlemen, for the headache, I think we need to take a little bit more than a discipline. I think we need to look at the cause. I think we need to look at some of these new ideas on what can we do differently. I think everyone will honestly agree. Lots of hard work has happened over the last 20, 25 years on making tourism the new gold and employing more than the mining industry in our country. But I think everyone will agree that it wasn't a perfect equilibrium. And so my take on it, as we take more than a discipline in addressing the industry and changing the whole ecosystem, let's look at how and what can we do differently as an industry, but also as an entrepreneur. How do we get that new side hustles that everyone's talking about in your individual businesses? So let's try to create the best possible equilibrium, but let's look forwardly. And most importantly, I'd love to plant the seed about embracing informality. And I'm saying embrace informality as a bean counter and accountant, because I think it's time to reduce the red tape. Not only it's everyone's responsibility, and we need to in this new reset, let's roll out the red carpet for tourism. Thank you.
Wow, Akash, I really like that. And I think you, as we start speaking, you're gonna define to us, you know, what an informal business is. And I'm hoping one of the things that could come up is that while government struggled to come up with a clear concept of township economy revitalization, Department of Tourism might be the first to get it with all of these brains that are sitting here around this table. And next on the panel, we have Mr. Alon Reis. I'm very comprehensive in terms of reading Alon's profile, you know, because this is the guy who is known in the sector, he's known everywhere. But Alon, I'm just gonna read your profile for the sake of just reading it. You know, but really thanks for making time for us. So Alon Reis is regarded both locally and globally as a pioneer and maverick in the business incubation industry. He's the founder and CEO of Race Corp, which according to The Economist is the only genuine incubator in Africa and which currently supports over 500 businesses. So Alon, thank you so much for, you know, for joining us. I'd like to hear your thoughts, you know, as well in terms of the tourism sector, how it's been hit, everything else that's been happening, all of the stats that have been put out there. What would be your opening remarks?
Thanks, Sibusiso. Just let me first start off by saying that I'm not a specialist in tourism at all. So I don't want to come across as somebody who knows anything about tourism. What I have been doing for the last 20 years is working with entrepreneurs. And just my view on what's going on is, first of all, I think it's important that we accept that this is going to be tough. And what hasn't been said so far is that I believe there will be a consolidation in the industry. There will be a shrinking in the industry. It has to be said, and I unfortunately am too pragmatic not to say it. So we have to start there, and will you be part of that consolidation or will you not? I'm not sure. But I've been working with at two levels. So I've been working with entrepreneur level and I've been working at a municipality level around tourism. And I just want to share with you some five points and then an example in my opening remarks. So I was called in by a municipality who had a tourism industry that was obviously struggling and asked to see what I could do. And my view is always to be pragmatic and practical. So the first thing that I need to say here, which is going to make me a little bit unpopular, especially in government circles, is the term SMME. I've said this before, the term SMME is part of the problem because a small business, a micro business, a medium business don't have the same issues. If we're dealing with a chain of hotels who's sitting in on this webinar and we're dealing with a small three-person operation, they don't have the same issues and they don't have the same strategy. So what's very important here is that we start to split up this term or never use this term. Either we're talking about micro business, medium business, small business, whatever we call it, or we need to split them out. That's point number one. Point number two is around specialization. So what everyone thinks the natural reaction now, which many entrepreneurs have, is that at this point in time, we could put many fishing rods into the sea and we see what we catch. I'm saying do the opposite. I'm saying it's about specialization right now. You have more chance of survival if you specialize than if you put this big net out. And what I mean by that is selecting an ecosystem. And the Honorable Deputy Minister spoke about that we're not an island and that we need to collaborate. And it's effectively looking at ecosystems and choosing an ecosystem within which to operate. And I'll give an example of that just now. The third point I want to make is around sales versus marketing. Marketing has been a big proponent of the tourism sector, and it's very much around, you know, digital marketing, Facebook, LinkedIn, etc. And that's been a big part of the mix. I believe right now, and what I'm working with a couple of tourism entrepreneurs, is that these things here, these knuckles and that phone, this is what we need to be doing now. This is going back to basics and about selling, actually selling as entrepreneurs, and not just this marketing. The fourth part is around remodeling the finance, and Akash sort of alluded to that in the sense that we need to remodel the businesses. The businesses are not going to be the same. We've got instances where we've got less people in our organization. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad, but all the model changes in terms of how we make money, and we have to understand what the ideal model is under these circumstances with lower demand. And finally, we have to pivot, and I might talk about that a little later and what that means, and many people have misinterpreted what that word is. So I'm going to finish off with an example right now. So I went into with the municipality, we looked at the environment that was there, and there happened to be a lot of auctions in that particular municipality. So I said, okay, so that's an ecosystem. What does the auction ecosystem look like? You might give another example of perhaps the medical tourism, or you might have, conference tourism. There's different, everyone knows better than me what the different ecosystems are. So we started working with one, then two of these small tourism businesses in the space. And we asked them to start using their databases to promote the auctions that were happening in their town. It wasn't their business, but promote the auctions that are happening in town. Then the people who come for the auctions would stay at them. And when they were staying with them, they needed transport. So they worked with the transporters to get them to and from the auction. And they arranged actually transport at certain times to the auction, back from the auction. And then the different transport companies then were about moving the goods back to where whoever bought the goods, sending the goods there. And finally, in the rooms, there was not finally. So penultimately, in the rooms, there were pamphlets around the different other auctions that were taking place and promoting the auctions. And then finally, and this is my best part, is that as soon as the alcohol ban stopped, there was a drink that they even created called the Loud Gavel, which was around the auctioneer space. So it's about really starting to specialize, choosing a ecosystem, and then thriving within that small ecosystem.
Sure, thanks, Alon. And a couple of people actually agree with you when it comes to the whole thing you raised about the term SMME, so comments are coming through and people are sharing the same sentiment, and I've heard it before as well, so I'm really looking forward to getting into that as well, especially on the topic of informality, just linking back to what Akesh is saying. And then the last gent, before now we start really opening up the conversation, I've got Safety Bukula. Safety, I think we'd like to apologize because we got your surname wrong on the invitation. Truly apologize for that. And then Safety is one of those guys, who just say to me, Sbu, just say, when you introduce me, just say it's Safety Bukula, and then he's a founder of Caesar, and let's actually leave it there. But I can tell stories about Safety. Safety, I've been following you for the past couple of weeks, and I think you've been on the ground when it comes to webinars and seminars, and so it would be interesting to see how you consolidate your opening remarks based on everything that you've been in. I think the last couple of weeks you were extremely busy. Safety, you on mute.
I hope you can hear me now.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. And we are still on those webinars, by the way. We have about 3 this week. Tomorrow is the Northwest, so let me start by promoting. And the Eastern Cape and the Free State. So the conversations continue across the country. But Sbu, I just want to make a few points. The first point I want to make is that I speak as an industry insider and not as an outsider. So whether you're talking about an SME or talking about tourism, I'm an insider to both. Because how we actually got into tourism is that since 2012, we've been bringing some international conferences into South Africa. So part of the business I run is in what is called the MICE space in my industry. So I speak as one of you, the audience, not these people sitting here. I speak as one of the other people sitting behind my screen here, because of course then I run CZA, Tourism SME Network. CZA stands for See South Africa. So I think that's an important point. So that's the angle that I'm actually going to be taking as I speak here. But we get to that later, because I think, as an insider, I have some insights in terms of what's going on in the industry. And I think the starting point actually to make, based on what I've just said, and based on these webinars that we're running with the provincial destination marketing organizations, is that, and I think Nemara made this point before, the problems didn't start with COVID. I think that the challenges that we've been facing in terms of SME development in this sector predate COVID. And and this is coming through even as we converse across the country now with all the webinars that we are doing, And so what COVID has done has just shown us, I think, more clearly what the situation is. I was very pleased to hear what Akash said earlier when he said, he's seeing some pockets of resilience, and I think Alon says the same thing. That's very encouraging because, one of the things that we've discovered with the arrival of COVID is that a lot of these SMEs, of our SMEs in tourism, have got very short runways. And so I think that the question of resilience is an important one that we need to think about. So as I wrap up, because then I can go into more depth, as we proceed. For me, the big question, or the big word in my head right now, coming from pre-COVID, the current conversations that we are having in the tourism sector with SMEs across the country, is that we need one big thing called a rethink. If there was a big button that we could press, written rethink, I would put my foot on that button and stand on it for quite some time. And I think we need to rethink things at 3 levels. Actually, as a network, when the National Department of Tourism and South African Tourism and other players, TPCSA, were working on the tourism recovery plan, we actually made quite an extensive submission into that. And the point that we made is that we need to rethink things at 3 levels. We need to rethink things at government level, because government is an important player in terms of SME support in this field. I think there's a need for us to seriously rethink our approach, our traditional approach to SME. We certainly need to rethink things at industry level. I think that, the way that the industry has approached tourism in the country in the past, COVID-19 is forcing us to rethink that. And I think if we do that rethink correctly, we will come out on the other side stronger, and we'll come up with very interesting things. And lastly, I think we need to rethink things at enterprise level, at the level of SMEs. And I'm happy to go into more detail into each of these during the discussion. But really, my opening remarks, COVID, the problem didn't start with COVID. It started before COVID. COVID revealed what was already there. And it forces all of us as players to really rethink the way we do things in this industry. There's big hope on the other side, because tourism will continue to be there. People will continue to travel. So the opportunities will continue to be there.
Good stuff. Okay, I would like to encourage everybody to please use the chat platform, put all of your questions there, put all your comments there. I'm going to be going through some of them. I'm going to be picking some nice ones there, so that we can keep the conversation going. But I think, Septi, I'm not going to move away from you yet, because I think you are going to set the tone in terms of what conversation are we really going to be having here. Okay, and my question to you is very, 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 very simple. What exactly is going on the ground? How bad are things? Because only then can we say this is how we're going to fix them. You're the guy on the ground. How bad is it? Are people going to bed hungry? People don't know how they're going to pay their next rent. What exactly is going on, if you were to describe it for us?
So thank you, Budi. So that's why I said I was quite encouraged by the comments that Akash made. Yeah. Because, both from the point of view of the studies that we have seen, and also in terms of our own conversations across the country,
Yeah.
Both with entrepreneurs and destination marketing organizations that we're working with now, is that the situation is quite difficult. SMEs are really, really battling. A lot in our network, for instance, said, they think that the best thing to do is to shut down, albeit temporarily, and then just resume when conditions allow it, whether it's late this year or early next year. I think that's a pragmatic way of looking at things. But, some of the DMOs have been telling me that, listen, long before there was COVID, the survival rate of SMEs in tourism is very low. And I think because tourism is a traditional industry, and I think because, a lot of our SMEs specifically are really, we're just selling the same products. And I think that in itself just tells me that there's something wrong, because we shouldn't be talking about, excuse me, these marginal businesses, because there are many opportunities in this country that are actually not being unearthed in terms of bringing out new products. We're all selling the same thing. We're selling the mountain in Cape Town and Robben Island, and a few things in between, winelands and that kind of stuff. And then we sell the Kruger National Park. But there's a whole lot of new product opportunities right across the length and breadth of this country, which is such a beautiful country. And we're not unearthing those. And so we're really going into areas where there's intense competition, where we're going head on with the big players who have the capabilities and the capacities that we won't be able to match in 50 years. And we're leaving out, possibilities of niches, both domestically and internationally, and so that's why for me the rethinking thing is, because even when we expose our SMEs internationally, we take them to markets that are overtraded, by South African standards, the red ocean markets. And we're not enabling SMEs to focus on markets, like Alon was saying, where they can focus on niches, where they can really excel and do very well. The niche might be small, but for SMEs, it might actually be big enough. So that's why I'm saying at different levels, I think we need to just have a conversation which says we need to rethink our approach to this.
Yeah. And I mean, Mpopi, if you're listening to what Septi is saying, and the same thing I'm going to pose to Alon as well. So if ESD, let's say enterprise development has been existing since the draft codes of 2005. In between, people came and left and people became ESD practitioners and all of that. There were a lot of programs that were created for the tourism sector as well, but we actually find ourselves in this situation. As a practitioner, what do you think then has been going wrong with all of these ESD programs that for tourism that have been popping up on LinkedIn, and we're all excited about this?
Yeah, so I would like to answer the question slightly differently, and I would like to use the departure point of the annual BBBE tourism survey that the department does, every year. We assisted them with the recent one, and essentially the purpose of the most recent one was almost to have a look at the trend, and it was over a 6-year period. And in essence, and obviously I'm over summarizing, but in essence, what we picked up was the impact was not coming through. What does that mean? That means the investment is being made, but it's not translating. Obviously, in terms of a BEE survey, we would look at the specific scorecard elements. And I just want to draw relations between two buckets. So, for example, in our view, your investment in skills development, the benefits of that should translate in what you see in employment equity, whether it's job creation or whether it's migration through the management levels. In theory, if you skill your employee base, you should start to see the results at an employment equity level. It should start to transform, but importantly, the transformation should start to escalate to more senior management levels. I want to draw parallels with ESD and procurement. So our view then is, if you invest well in enterprise and supplier development, it should translate in preferential procurement. So in other words, Black SMEs in the industry shouldn't operate in the peripheries of the economy. They should start to be afforded an increasing value of procurement opportunities because that's the result of your investment in at an enterprise and supply development level. But we weren't seeing that. So one of the recommendations and insights that we actually pulled out of that was to say, and I want to then align with what Septi was saying, we really need to rethink how we're solving this problem, because the investment is made, but the return is not being seen. One of the views that we put forward was, as government, we would like to challenge us reassessing how we spend, okay? Obviously there's massive spend, but I want to bring it down to tourism. How do we spend on all that which forms part of tourism? And what portion of that goes to SMEs, okay? And by that I mean, not only are we using Black-owned travel agencies, but from whom are they procuring? So that it's not only first year, it starts to cascade. And in what way are we being bold in making the decisions regarding that spend? So for us is, because the transformation in terms of the spend is going to come largely from B2B, those of us that are buying as businesses have got to really relook at how we're buying and from whom we're buying, and to what extent we're breaking down those opportunities so that we're incorporating more deliberately the Black SMEs in this industry and creating that sustainability of opportunities. So a very strong view that we hold is a lot of the spend needs to be opened up by government. In that respect, you'll be leading by example. And then private sector ideally then will not be so much a dependency from a preferential procurement perspective, but if you lead in that respect, then they can follow, because you're demonstrating how it's possible. That really needs decisiveness and boldness. So for us, that's probably the one way that you're going to unlock the benefits of the massive investment that is going to enterprise and supplier development, both in private and in public. We need to consolidate our efforts, and we need to start to ask ourselves, for what? I'm doing this for what? It's to create access to markets. And if it's not doing that, let's go back to the drawing board and say, what do we need to change about that so that we can achieve that access to markets? But even then, what is that access to markets? Let's set aside that spend. Let's be deliberate in how we spend, so that as the SMEs are being developed, there are indeed opportunities, because otherwise we get stuck in this frustration of development for the sake of development. And we don't even need to unpack that further, because we know SMEs are really tired of feeling like, I'm investing my time in the development, but I'm not seeing the opportunities.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, Alon, I'm sure just like me, you're tired of this conversation. You know, we've been hearing about the people are making the investment, impact is not coming up. People are making an investment, impact is not coming out. I think, you know, people have sort of like taken this ESD sector as a joke as well, with all of the money that has come in, but it's getting leaked now. And I mean, what do? We're seeing the results now, Alon, and the results are saying all of that money that we've been putting in, basically, it hasn't been making a difference. What do we do next? Even the commissioner is worried about this ESD sector.
Thanks. I think from my perspective, I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years. Before BE came into play in 2005, 2007, we were already operating in the incubation space before, and hopefully once ESD has done its work properly, and I'll go into that now, we'll be in it after that. But, you know, for me, one of the bigger, most sobering moments for me is we had a guy who came into a race school program who was running a business that does gardening services. And one day at a conference, at basically a supply development conference, I see a stand and I see him there and I greet him. And then I realized that he's on the stand and he's become a competitor to me. He's come into one of our programs, and he had a gardening services, and now he's in ESD. And to me, that's one part of the problem. The second part of the problem, and I'm going to break this into two, is who is doing the work and who is coming into these programs. So from a race school point of view, we have got a concept called Blue Heart. So a Blue Heart means the ability to stand up again and again and again. If you look at internationally around, you can look at all the different surveys on entrepreneurship. Actually, entrepreneurs form around 2 to 3% of the population group on average. South Africa, depending which years, hovers around 4 to 47%, Uganda 28%, but if you look to the West, you look to US, Europe, Japan, it hovers around 1 to 3%, and on average, the world's sitting at about 3.5%. So South Africa is above the world average, but below the developing world average, which makes sense. But now if you break that down further into entrepreneurs, if I were the government, I would want to back entrepreneurs who are able to build businesses. So there are three types of businesses. There's survivalists, there's lifestyleists, and there's growth businesses. If I were the Deputy Minister listening in, I'd say, where is my budget best spent? And to me, that would be number one, would be the growth entrepreneurs, people who can start a business and then grow it substantially and employ more people and build value. And number two, I would then go to the lifestyle business. But from a survivalist point of view, I wouldn't go there. We get between 50 and 100 applications a day to join Race Corp by entrepreneurs. 1 in 100 will get through. 1 in 100 will get through. And we don't look at business plan at all in that whole thing. We look at from who is that entrepreneur? Do they have the character to stand up again and again? So coming back to the problem is that you've got all these programs all over the place, but they take virtually anyone in. And when we started selecting already 20 years ago, we were deemed to be these evil guys who selected. Now it seems to be becoming normalized. But the bigger problem for me is around the actual providers. 3 years ago, we did a call to action around getting people who, what we call guides or mentors in. And as part of that process, they have to do this case study, which is called the Bussy case study, which is effectively an income statement. There's sales, cost of sales, equals GP, expenses, net profit. Anyone in business should know that formula, right, Akash? Everyone should know that. We had 31 applications from government and quasi-government incubators, 31 applications. We brought them through. How many do you think could work out net profit? These are people who are teaching other people how to run businesses. The answer is 2, that 6.5% of them actually knew how to work out net profit. These are the people who we are taking into our system and calling them the enterprise development practitioners. So the problem is that we take everyone in and we allow anyone who without any understanding of who they are to become these practitioners. That's a big part of the problem. So for me, the things that I look for is what is the results, and I'm just maybe do a promo here. We 41% growth in turnover, but more importantly, we've got 238% growth in our net profit. If you look at your net profit versus your turnover, that talks to sustainability. And what we need to be focusing on now is not just building businesses, but building sustainable businesses whose models work in this kind of environment.
Sure, and I think. You will understand, I think, from the Deputy Minister and Dominique, I think the reason why I'm starting with everybody else before I start engaging the conversation there, I think it's because I want you guys to have an understanding of, the broader ecosystem and what's happening on the ground, so that at least you can understand where you fit in. And I'm saying this because, with all due respect, Dominique, from the DSBD side, side of things, the DSBD for me always tends to, they seem very confused in terms of what the ecosystem is. I think sometimes the DSBD is not even aware that the ecosystem actually exists, So this is why I'm having this conversation. But Nemala, just coming back to you, you're listening to all of these things that are coming up, right? So I'm not saying it's all doom and gloom, I just want us to look at the reality before we move to the next level. But as an ESD, a manager, within corporate, when you're hearing all of these things that we've been doing programs, there's no impact. And then you're listening to some of the stats that Alon is actually bringing out in terms of people that claim to be practitioners. It must make it difficult for you to sign the checks when you look at this whole situation.
So I have to say that my take is a little bit different. I actually believe that there's no silver bullet, that you have to understand that we're dealing with human beings, that people are taking information at different levels of understanding. And therein lies really, Alon made reference to the selection criteria, and that's a critically important component of making sure that the fit for purpose in terms of the program, in terms of the offering, it meets not only the perception of or the objective of what the corporate, whether it's or even public or private sector wants to ultimately achieve at the end of the day as the objectives, but also the businesses that we're taking on the journey also fit in and they are able to, they're receptive to it. So it's a holistic picture. And I think for me, what's very important is that now more than ever, the time is critical for us to all work in a more collaborative way and a more collaborative fashion so that we're all working towards the same objective. I actually said a while back when our lockdown first started, and I said, you know, the world over has literally came to a stop. Can we, when we talk about that reset button, it's going to be relevant for everyone in every single sector. And why can't we actually apply it in that level, you know, and sort of apply some sort of blanket, and this I'm talking from a personal idealist, in brackets, idealist perspective, but of course, real world is different. But I think what we can do, certainly from our perspective and from where I'm sitting, as you say, from an ESD manager perspective, I think for me, an ecosystem approach is critically important. I think we need to be very cognizant that when we endeavor with enterprise development interventions, that it is a whole bigger picture than just a program and a cost allocated to it, and that there's a time frame and this is what it works. I mean, a starting point for us as Nedbank right now is we looking at all our previous programs and looking at turnaround for those specific business owners and what can we do realistically. Because I think at the end of the day, the time right now is absolutely critical for us to be working together. Now, if I just, I mean, we spoke about, Alan spoke about, you know, when we approach or when we're working with entrepreneurs, we're looking at what is the real life situation without the business plan. But we know within the banking scenario, the financial institutions, we need those plans. So how do we work together so that we're all working? And really from a banking perspective, it is, you know, from a regulatory environment, is the way we work in terms of our checks and balances. So I think we all need to work closer together around understanding where exactly do we want to take these businesses. And we have to really understand that it's not just about this is point A, this is our program start, there's the end point. We have to have proper exit strategies in place. The other point that I want to make is that in terms of the situation as it stands, I think, as I mentioned, we're dealing with human beings. We could never solve for every single component. It is what it is, but we need to now take stock and say, okay, this is what are the low-hanging fruit in terms of what we can do as interventions ASAP. This is going to be more our medium to long-term, and this is going to be the long-term. And I think when I cannot stress enough the importance of really working collaboratively in an ecosystem approach. And when I say ecosystem, I mean, we can't just as one component or one sectorial approach say this is how we're going to look at providing intervention. There's so many different facets in terms of a business value chain and what different components constitute within a single business. And we need to make sure that we are giving input on one level and be able to take that through within a business environment across all other facets of the business, and not just you know, hit a loggerhead in terms of we haven't solved for a particular element of the business value chain. Yeah. So therefore, I stress on the ecosystem approach holistically.
Yeah, and I think Alon's favorite term, one of his favorite terms is ecosystem. Septi's, one of your favorite terms is ecosystem. Nemala now adopted ecosystem. And, you know, as you were speaking about working together, you know, I actually wanted to ask the question, you know, what does it mean when we're talking about working together? And then one of the attendees, Jackie Nell, actually also asked the same question, that, you know, when we're speaking about working together and when we're speaking about ecosystem, you know, what exactly do we mean by that? And I'll come back to you, Namal. I just want to hear from Akesh's side. You know, Akesh, I mean, building this ecosystem and strengthening it, whether it has global links, it has local links, it involves private sector, it involves the SMME, most importantly, it involves government. I mean, what does that working together look like at the end of the day?
So I think this working together has got to be a different thinking, and and I think, you know, when I mentioned earlier embracing informality, it doesn't mean there's no hardships. So we're seeing a lot of hardships attached to it. But embracing informality is how does it transcend actually into a tourism operator on the ground? So, and I think it'll impact various parts of it. It's the way we bank. We spoke about whether a business plan is relevant to access credit. So Nirmala, I'm going to put you on the spot now at the moment. So 20 years ago, I used to head up unsecured lending at Nedco at 135 Rivonia. And I'm a banker and accountant by heart. But not once have I ever seen a bank, and maybe this should be out to, I think, the Banking Council, Bongiwe at the moment. Have you never asked to take an entrepreneur to a credit committee? You get your consultants, and it's all banks, it's not Nedbank only specifically. You write a business plan and you say in theory, and you get your business banker to meet with him, and he presents at credit committee to make a risk. Why can't banks, as part of the credit assessment, in addition to the business plan, listen and speak, the credit speak to an entrepreneur? So that's the type of embracing informality that we need to encourage, not necessarily for tourism, but in all industries. But we also need to look at different ways to market it. How do we take pivoting our business, Sibusiso, to a bed and breakfast operator in Bushbuck Ridge or Tulemache? And we need to be able to say, what does pivoting your business means in post-COVID? And embracing informality doesn't mean we're treating you as a poor cousin. It means you're taking your two swimming pools and you're inviting and selling your swimming pool more than your accommodation to transform your business. If you have 500 guests for a weekend to swim at 50 Rand a head, you're going to get 25,000 Rand that weekend, 100,000 Rand a month. So when we talk about embracing informality, it's not only talking about accounting and compliance. We need to really transcend, and we need to pivot this in practical examples in the tourism value chain. There will be skeptics attached to it. And you know what? Maybe it's time we say, if there are people that are skeptical, we have the wrong players in the team. And maybe we need to change the team, the way in which that we grow and develop tourism. So that's my take around how do we make embracing informality practical.
Yeah. No, and Akesh, a lot of people are really agreeing with you. Everybody is in the comments. They're like, yes, 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 yes. And I think this embracing informality, I'll come back to safety with it, because I know that it also speaks to, it speaks to what's happening on the ground. Nemala, I haven't forgotten you. We're going to speak about the working together as well. Very critical to hear it from you. But I mean, Dominique, from government side, before I come to the Honorable Deputy Minister, I mean, the private sector and all of these ESD initiatives or small business development initiatives, guys like Safety running on the ground, people are ready to work, right? And I just want now to see from the DSBT point of view, when you're listening to all of these people on the ground and they're ready to work, they're ready to put in the work, and we're speaking about working together, what kind of collaborations are you already identifying? Because, I mean, when we get out of here in the next couple of minutes, we're going to start speaking solutions and saying this is what needs to happen. But now we're sort of like connecting this working together, this ecosystem. And I wanted to hear from the DSDP point of view, from everything that you've heard, what are your thoughts and where do you see this collaboration happening?
So maybe I can just start by saying that the department does understand the ecosystem. I think that coordination and fragmentation still remains a huge challenge.
Yeah.
And how do we start dealing with that? But we find ourselves in the new normal where this situation is improved. The key direction that government has now taken is to not merely return the economy to where it was before the pandemic, but to forge a new economy in the new global reality. So our economic recovery strategy going forward is to restructure the economy and also to achieve inclusive growth. Yeah. So the department has conceptualized COVID-19 relief programs as well as economic recovery plans which are underway. These are detailed support programs that are being finalized and consulted with in conjunction with departments like agriculture, tourism, Department of Mineral Resources and Energy to support the sector. So we've come up with a host of interventions. We've reprioritized most of our budget towards the Township and Rural Entrepreneurship Fund that aims to strengthen informal businesses based on dedicated schemes. We also understand the borders are closed, so there's an opportunity for localization. The focus is now on creating South African produced products to drive industrialization and also to target import institution. There's a need for business viability to deal with issues around business rescue and turnaround strategies that has become critical in our economic recovery plan, and also start to drive precise transformation targets for women, youth, and people living with disabilities. So if I can just jump into some of the key interventions that the department has got underway. The department introduced a payment holiday for CIFA-funded clients, which looks at rescheduling CIFA clients' loan obligations that have been badly impacted on COVID-19. So CIFA will forgo all cash installments. The SMME debt relief program that was launched in April 2020 was to really ensure that SMMEs don't completely close down. So it provided with working capital, and to date, 1,497 applications have come through, and the department has disbursed 303 million to date. The Business Viability Program, this is a program that will be launched at the end of this month, looks at supporting enterprises to overcome both the financial and non-financial constraints. I spoke about the issues around turnaround as well as business rescue to survive the new normal. Another critical program that is being launched at the end of this month is the Manufacturing Support Program to establish a more focused import replacement program for our small businesses, which includes blended financing in the form of the Kula Credit Guarantee Scheme in partnership with CIFA and participating banks. We've currently got Nedbank and Standard Bank as part of our programs implementing especially the Township and Rural Program, which I mentioned that most of our funding has been allocated to. So the Township and Rural Program is in line with the district development model to ensure that there's integration and synergy to ensure coherence. The plan really entails getting our informal business accounted for in the formal sector. A lot of us, a lot of the individuals in the, or rather partners in the ecosystem disagree when we say that our aim is to encourage compliance and move informal businesses into the formal space. That is ensuring that they are registered with SARS, CIPC. We need to get our informal businesses credit ready and ensure that they've got some credit history so that they're able to secure funding in terms of moving forward.
Yeah.
So those partnerships with the banks become critical. If I can just mention a very important aspect, in terms of legislation, I just need to go back to the issue around the definition. That is an area that we realized is problematic because the definition is not utilized. So the SMME definition is something that we're currently working on. We're re-looking the definition of SMME, clear description for what it means, looking at issues around the proxies and the sectors which in each of these categories fall in, so that government is in a position to come up with targeted responses within the legislation space. Another critical area that we are dealing with in terms of legislation is that the drafting of the Small Enterprise Service Bill to deal with the issue of non-payment by both public and the private sector. During lockdown, if government and big business had just paid the amounts due to SMME during this time, then the bulk of the demands for support would have been delayed at a huge scale. So non-payment has really resulted in a lot of these SMMEs closing down because there's no appropriate mechanism. So those are part of the some of the key areas that have been conceptualized over the last 3 to 4 months that are being implemented. And ongoing programs and schemes are currently being conceptualized and being incorporated into the economic recovery partnership plan going forward. Private sector remains critical. We have partnered with a lot of private sector organizations to implement a lot of these programs. If I could just mention some of the township and rural programs that have recently been launched is the spaza shops and general dealer programs. We've got a host of the wholesalers nationally across border in partnership with us. I mentioned Nedbank and Standard Bank that are providing ongoing supplementary support to kickstart this program. There's the bakeries and confectionaries program. There's automotive support program. as well as the clothing and textile support program that is underway. New programs that will be launched at the end of this month that also deal with informal businesses in the township and village areas. As the personal care support program that looks at supporting your hairdressers and nail technicians, butchery support program, general workers and vendors, and open air prepared food outlets. So there's a host of interventions and critical to ensuring that these programs are fully implemented to the extent that we revitalize the township, ease the players within the ecosystem. Thank you, Sibusiso.
Great. Thanks for that. Thanks for that. And I'm glad you're saying the DSBD understands the ecosystem, and I think and that you've at least highlighted some of the issues could be. But I think the ecosystem is looking for you guys, and they really looking for you guys to come on board. In most of the times when we are criticizing the DSDB, it's basically a slap to say, welcome, we are sitting this side, come join us. We do it to each other as ESD practitioners as well. But I'm really glad you've actually pointed that out. Now, Honorable Deputy Minister, I think you've been listening to the conversation. And, these bright minds obviously have been coming up with all of these different ideas, and we really want to jump into the solutions now. And I just wanted to get, your thoughts briefly in terms of, does this make you believe even more that definitely there's something that's going to be done to assist the SMMEs in this sector, especially after today? You can unmute, Deputy Minister. Okay, let's unmute. Okay, there you go. You have, yes.
No, thanks very much, moderator. We really are convinced that the input that panelists are making and the comments that participants are equally making on the chat group with very great importance, and it will assist us to take this process forward. We understand that it's not going to be an easy route, but it will require us to work together to make sure that we achieve that. Very, very interesting is that we need to do what Namila said we need to do, identify what are the low-hanging fruits, and be able to then use those low-hanging fruits to kickstart the process going forward, so that we are able, therefore, to make sure that we intervene wherever it is necessary. As government, we are prepared to listen and work together with everybody and take the process forward as Bukula has indicated. We have received the very extensive comments from various individuals and companies. We are finalizing the recovery plan now as a means of taking the process forward together. And we believe that this exercise will help us a great deal in arresting the challenges that are confronted by SMEs. I'm glad that the DG, acting DG, for example, of SMEs has raised a very critical matter of reviving the townships and village economy. And at the center of reviving that township and village economy, it's your tourism. Because most of tourism attraction areas are in the rural areas. And therefore, working together with the Department of SMEs is very critical, so that we're able to revive these and the local economy, especially the townships and the village economies, and be able to make sure that we take our people out of these triple challenges of poverty, unemployment, and inequality. So the presentation is very much helpful. Well, there are questions that the participants were asking. One of them is about how does government intervene in assisting that there's a substantial amount of procurement that goes to the private, that goes to the SMEs. You will know that the decision was long taken that 30% of our procurement should be directed to SMEs. So we are currently working with National Treasurer to say, how then do we make sure that accommodation becomes part of that benefit of that 30%? But as you will know that the President, when he was presenting, addressing the nation on August 9 on the Women's Day, has indicated that government has taken a conscious position that 40% of procurement by the state will be set aside for women. And we are going to be monitoring that, working with Treasurer to say, how do we make sure that SMEs in the tourism sector, equally women and also, equally women also in the tourism sector, are able to benefit out of that 40% of procurement. This is what we will have to work together with National Treasurer and create a monitoring system together with the department of SMEs to make sure that this doesn't become a pipe dream, but it becomes a reality.
Yes.
To achieve it and realize and create system of how to evaluate and measure the performance around that particular area.
Yeah. No, thank you, Deputy Minister. And I think another thing to add there is that everything that we do moving forward as government, with government being involved, we want to do it with as little to no corruption as possible, so that the process can be smooth after everything that we've been seeing. And I think you and I also touched on it last night when we were speaking. But now, as everybody is closing, we know what the problem is. We know what the different views are. We've seen different angles in terms of where everybody's coming from. We're speaking informal businesses, we're speaking people on the ground, we're speaking ESD practitioners, we're speaking government, we're speaking Nemala who's got the big checks. Now we just need to go back and say, from here, this is how we're going to sort this out. And Nemala, I'm going to start with you for that one answer that you owe me, which I think is going to be part of your solution. You spoke about working together, right? So when we end this meeting, what happens? How do we start working together? So if you can just give me that answer in terms of, what does that working together look like? And also just get your overall, solution in terms of, okay, guys, if there's a tourism business that's sitting here, they know there's a solution that's coming and it actually looks like this.
Great, thank you so much. So just before I kick off, I just want to say to Akash, when you chose to leave the banking industry, I joined from the community development side. So I come from where you're sitting now. So I just want to say that absolutely hear what you say. I think we've evolved over the years and to the point now where we've taken our credit managers out of their ivory towers, out into the rural areas, and we've had businesses doing a business plan on an A5 handwritten sheet of paper, so that we know that they understand and get it through. So we've come a long way, and certainly from a banking perspective, we actually have created training components where our teams go out and say to our entrepreneurs, what exactly do we look at when you give us this stats or this figure or this statement on your business plan, or when you provide that information? This is how we interpret, this is what we read. But I think, I just want to say that, in terms of the relief funding and everything that's happening at the moment, specifically, banks are constrained by the low appetite of application for loans based on the general scenario where there's so much uncertainty and everyone moving towards downscaling operations. So there's various factors and various elements that we have to be cognizant of. And that I think that emphasizes the need for us to work and closely and collaborate even more importantly. So what do I mean? One example is we've been engaging with the women in tourism over the last 3 to 5 years, I think. And I think we are now at the point where we are ready to put in place a turnaround program. And in fact, this was something that we were planning just prior to getting into the pandemic and the lockdown. I think it means that we have to be speaking more. I think exactly the kind of feedback we're getting here today, the kind of what Akash has mentioned, I think we must, because it's we all affected. I think that the days of when we have these opinions and we sit with them, I think we need to be more forthcoming. Send that email, say, let's set up a meeting. This is my obstacle that I have with you as a critical component of the business value chain in the sector in terms of turnaround holistically. Let's talk. Let's discuss. This has been my personal experience. I would like to rectify that. I would like to know how you are going to change, how you're going to become relevant to the current economic crisis that we are faced with. I think when I spoke about that reset button and it being, if we could hope in an ideal world have it holistically reset, I think we can still within our own means accommodate for that in terms of speaking more, being more forthcoming to having those discussions whereby it's towards the collective outcome and objective of growing our SMEs at the end of the day. The bottom line is the successful growth of our SME sector, our business, those are our clients. It is important that we are a critical component, that they are growing, there's turnaround, there's sustainable growth, not only now for the short term, but for the long term as well. And all of us as key role players, it's best that we start speaking and we start planning. And with the whole underlying principle about where's all the money in terms of all the different enterprise and supply development interventions over the years. Well, let's look at those that need, that really where those had all the salient elements for a successful program. Let's talk about what didn't work and let's share that information in terms of our common objective and output.
Like it. Somebody likes it. Somebody said, Ms. Reddy is speaking about open dialogue. Open dialogue, extremely, extremely, extremely critical. Let's go to Mpupi. So Mpupi, I know that when we speak about transformation and we speak about where we need to go next, and then when the deputy minister was speaking about, procurement opportunities, you just couldn't help yourself. You were just nodding and nodding and nodding. So I think, in terms of your solutions and your closing remarks, and maybe also what you're gonna be committing to after this meeting. And sorry to everybody, we're gonna go slightly over, but I think these are very critical solutions that everybody's gonna bring through, so that we're not a talk shop. So please hang on just a little bit, 5 more minutes. So yeah, Mpupi.
Yeah, so I think, let me not belabor the point, because I think access to markets is, we can all agree, the definition of success in the work that we do is really only realized in the extent to which we afford our SMEs access to markets. But in fairness, the SMEs must also be ready for that access to market. But I want to give a slightly different closing remark. So of course, we're in the SME development space, and essentially we try and be strategic in our programs. And what that means is we take a long-term view of where is it that you're going and what is it that you're trying to achieve, and how does that translate into smaller milestones. But because of everything that has been going on with COVID, we've really shifted our focus to more, what are the tactics that you're going to target in order to gear yourself up for the post-COVID life, because there is life after COVID. And our focus has become on two very simple things. Earlier on, Alon touched on marketing versus sales. We find that even at a marketing level, there isn't a clear plan with a lot of the SMEs that we work with. So we have gone back to, how are you positioning yourself so that you stand out in the market? Because there's noise in the market. There's many just like you. And at some level, what you offer stops being unique. So how is it that we try to position you so that there's a uniqueness, even if it's not in the service or the product, but it's in how you attract clients? So we've taken a very strong focus on digital marketing strategies for the SMEs that we work with. Because the reality is, you're not going to be able to talk to people the way you were talking to people before and attracting customers the way you were. If you're not clear on digitally, how are you standing out, it's going to be very difficult for you to find sustainability post-COVID. So we've redirected our energies to say, okay, let's park all the other elements that we would like to touch on in terms of sustainability of SMEs, and let's specifically focus on digitization. And that could be as simple as computer literacy, and it could be as complex as a strategy and collateral and social media elements and all the likes. But I think for us, we found that's likely where we're going to see the most impact, because when you start to speak to your customers in a manner that makes your voice unique, that's how you're going to start to stand out in a market that otherwise you start to look like everybody else. So that's been a deliberate focus area for us in gearing SMEs up. And ideally, of course, when the access to markets component is taken care of in terms of 30% spend with Black companies, 40% spend with Black women, or whatever the targets are, you as an entity are well positioned to stand out when those opportunities are presented to you in the near future.
Tanya Newell says 100% Poppy and gave you 3 exclamation marks. So that's fantastic. 3 exclamation marks means you're making a very good point. It's coming through the chat there. And then I think let's speak to Alon. Alon, okay. So what happens from here on? And I think we're going to lean on your experience when it comes to this, right? Because at the end of the day, we're talking about tourism SMMEs, but we are talking about SMMEs generally. So what solutions should we be thinking of, whether we're sitting in government, whether we're sitting as SMME development, whether we are business coaches, and I'm talking about the real business coaches, not those other friends of ours. But I mean, what do we do now? I pick up my laptop, I go sit down. What should I be thinking of?
Thanks. So just before I answer, just also around collaboration, I think it is a very important thing that the industry starts to work together. And funny enough, I've actually seen that over the last couple of years. There has been far more collaboration amongst different sectors that support the small business environment. Notice I didn't say SMME.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to maybe to answer your question. I'm going to just maybe re-emphasize the points that I made earlier, because that's what I think we should do. Is first of all is around specialization right now. I think specialization is very important, that we decide which ecosystem we're going to service, how we're going to stand out, as Mpubi said earlier, how we're going to stand out in that environment, and how we're going to support them and collaborate with them, which was part of the example I gave. Once again, I believe that we need to learn the old art of selling, and I don't dismiss digital strategy and being online and all that. I don't at all, but that is equally cluttered, and we need to have that as more hygiene factor that we know how. But what I'm seeing now is relationships are built by actually somebody, like in the good old days, knocking on a door, picking up a phone, going to see somebody and building a relationship. So I think the importance of building relationships now is more important than ever before. And what I've seen during COVID is there's almost when I use the word regression, I'm using it in a positive way to the old thing. I think people have appreciated relationships more now than ever before. As soon as you can't see anyone, your loved ones, your friends, you can't socialize. We understand the need for it as human beings. And the moment somebody reaches out in a sales way, I'm meeting with people, of course, social distancing and all, but I want to see people. I want to engage with them all the time. And then finally, then remodel your business. So we've spoken about a lower demand, but there's also a lower cost base. And what when I'm working with businesses right now, is to reimagine what that model looks like. Our models are built on how it used to be. Our models, and I'm not talking about the business, I'm talking about how the business is structured in terms of what percentage of cost is allocated to this, what percent of cost is allocated to that, etc. We can remodel that based on our current reality. And finally, we never got to it, but to pivot in the true sense of the word pivot, and not as the media are putting it out, which is basically restart, properly understanding how to pivot.
100%. Thanks a lot, Alon. And I think, these conversations, we really gonna need to have this conversation way after this webinar that we just had. I don't like talk shops, and I don't want this to be a talk shop. I think we've got enough brains sitting in this webinar, to come up with the proper solutions for SMMEs. Akesh, I know you obviously, speaking about embracing the informal, which is also very critical, especially when it comes to some of these SMMEs that we're seeing within the tourism sector. So how do we cater for them? When we're coming up with solutions, how do we cater for them? I see somebody on the chat is also, speaking about the long process of applying for relief funding, and then you're expected to have all of your company registration documents, but I mean, how do we take the informal and embrace them and make them part of this whole, ecosystem in terms of support?
I think, so we got to change the way we think. And I know it's easy to sit at this webinar and give ideas, and it says you might not be responsible, or you might say it irresponsibly, but I think people really need to listen and listen carefully. So and I say that responsibly. So an example is I chair the South African Institute of Chartered Accountants, one of the largest regions of chartered accountants. But not everyone looks as a business. And the conversation that we have is to how can we remove the red tape? We need people to think differently. So the example of doing credit like this over the internet, and the credit committee says, I want to meet Sibusiso. He is an entrepreneur. He stays in Uppington and he runs a 4-star bed and breakfast, and have a conversation with the entrepreneur. So it reduces the risk of lending incorrectly. And many of what your businesses are saying, that sometimes the bank don't understand us. So I think we need a new thinking, that we need to infuse it. And we mustn't be scared to think differently, Sibusiso. And I think people also are scared to think differently. We need to embrace this differentness. And all I can ask is that we try to look differently. I agree with you that we must keep the conversation going. So in my contribution is I'm going to reach out to the banking sector, and I'll keep Nirmala informed. So I'll write to the Banking Council to say, how can they treat tourism businesses? I'll write to the CEO, Bongiwe, Kas Kumadi is not there anymore, and say, how can you treat us differently? Can you do virtual credit? Can you look at maybe deferring some of the credit a little bit more longer, knowing that we have a bigger impact? Because banks are not necessarily treating tourism businesses, which are probably the most impacted, any different from many of the other businesses. And I think we need to be honest in this conversation and not hide behind anything else. But great conversation. Thank you for allowing me to contribute. I will do my one little bit to continue the conversation.
100%. Septi, now you being on the ground, obviously, you now need to go back on the ground and say, you guys saw me, I was live on Facebook, my name was all over this brochure, this is what happened. Is that message going to be positive? Are you seeing some kind of hope? And also, what's going to be your contribution as well after listening to all of the stakeholders? And, I know, funny enough, on my screen, you appeared to be sitting in the middle of everybody else. And you did say your eye is actually very different, so does it sound correct what you're hearing? Yeah, unmute yourself, Septi.
We've touched on many things here.
Yeah.
The challenge is, when you have to do during a crisis things that you haven't done when there was no crisis.
Yeah.
It makes life a bit difficult. And I'm just saying some of the points of the questions here. Give us practical solutions. If you want practical solutions, come to my webinar tomorrow in the Northwest, because there we talk practical solutions of how to survive. Quite frankly, and we got a great panel, and they really go down. And I think that entrepreneurs will get something of value there. But there's a lot of points that have been touched on by different people here, which hit on exactly the issues we deal with every day. We talk about every day. Collaboration, and I'm not going to elaborate on these issues. Collaboration is very important, and I'm speaking among us as entrepreneurs. Collaboration within the ecosystem, collaboration among entrepreneurs. Mpupi has spoken about digitalization. That's an issue that we're talking about a lot. And I don't think we talk about in exactly the sense that Alon alludes to, the clutter and that kind of stuff. We understand all of that. But, really as a tool and a platform to give you visibility, market visibility, global visibility. I think, it's the way that you actually embrace and use it. So let me not touch on those, because I think my colleagues have touched on them very, very clearly. I think for me there are 3 points I would like to land on this afternoon, if I leave those. One is, I said we need to have a rethink. I think we need to rethink how we package and sell the country, because I think therein lies a lot of opportunities for SMEs. you know, and we talk this with SMEs all the time. You know, South Africa is bigger than what is called the Golden Triangle of Durban, Cape Town, and Johannesburg. You know, there's a bigger country out there, and that country offers a lot of opportunities. In the Northern Cape, you've got the SKA. You know, what are we doing to actually build a product around the SKA? I mean, the SKA is a big thing, and there are many other good things around the Northern Cape and around this country, you know. I was up in Zululand one time, and I was absolutely blown away by the beauty of that place. And nobody talks about it. I come, you know, originally from the Eastern Cape, probably the most beautiful province in this country. You know, so we need to look at South Africa as a whole, you know, city, township, small town, rural, and develop those new products. You know, travelers, tourists today are looking for authentic experiences, are looking for unique experiences, and those unique experiences exist potentially across this country. And we just, I'm talking now maybe as an insider in tourism, those of us who are in tourism really need to work hard in developing and packaging those experiences. That's number one. Number two, domestic tourism. You know, South African tourism is too externally geared, right? And there was a question earlier which said, well, I mean, if I can afford to travel in my own country and it's cheaper to travel outside the country, well, there's a problem there. And, you know, we as a network are saying this is precisely where we need to focus SMEs, you know, because SMEs live in those communities. They live in those areas where these experiences are and can be unearthed. And if we focus on SMEs, and both in terms of driving domestic tourism, and I say to SMEs if they're listening to me, this is why you can take on the big boys and girls, because when it opens, they're all looking to Europe. Look here, there are opportunities. And the third thing is we need to diversify our markets. We are too traditionally focused on a few, you know, markets, even abroad, you know. And so that's why we say, you know, for SMEs, look for niches, and let's help them as government, as the industry, but look for niches, areas that are not overtraded, areas where you still can position yourself. I'm very grateful to South African tourism, for instance, because that's exactly the direction they're starting to take. They're starting to say, hey, SMEs, let's look at India, let's look at Vietnam, let's look at Jamaica. Let's not all look at Germany and the UK and, you know, these markets. Let's diversify. And so I think that, you know, these are the conversations that we want to have. We're not going to resolve it in one webinar. It's the conversation you said, after this webinar, we need to have a conversation. In our mind, these are the kinds of conversations we need to have. So I'm talking hope, I'm talking restart, I'm talking whatever you call post-COVID-19. I don't know when that will arrive. But in the age of COVID-19, there are opportunities.
Definitely. And I think, thank you for, you know, Septi, for those last words. And I would actually like to declare this a forum that's going to meet again, whether it's going to be recorded, whether it's not going to be recorded. I declare this a forum that I'm expecting to meet again next week. I'll speak to Maylene, I'll speak to everybody else so that this conversation can go forward. I mean, it's the first time I've actually had to hold a panel discussion with 8 geniuses. We couldn't even get to the crux of what we needed to speak about. And I'd like to thank you guys for coming here. To Deputy Minister, I've kept you longer and then you actually stayed with us. I really, really, really appreciate it. I think it gives it weight, you know, when we're having these discussions and you're listening and then you're absorbing the information as well. It's highly, highly appreciated. To all my panelists, you know, thank you for coming through. Thank you for staying longer as well. I hope that everybody's gonna meet. We all have each other's email addresses. Hoping this forum is going to meet next week. Let's talk practicality. Let's talk solutions. And all of the people that came, the participants to listen to the panel discussion, I am so sorry I couldn't take your questions. You know, like I said, it was quite a big panel, you know, but we've noted everything that you've said, and I think the panelists spoke to most of your points. Stay at home, guys, if you can. Let's flatten the curve together. sanitize, put on your masks, and yeah, we will see you on the flip side. Take care, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sibusiso.
Okay, Adri, do we hang up now, or is Adri there?
Hi, Sibusiso, you must end it on your side, please.
Cool stuff. Take care, everyone. Cheers.
Cheers.